Welcome, everybody, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today, we're talking about how to start your own indie dev studio with nothing with Pekru Pieni.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
In our live magical podcast, we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts. We talk with them one-on-one, get some stories from them, and then we also give time for community questions in the second half of each episode. So come and join us every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time to hear the expertise live and also ask your own questions live. We encourage you to stop by. There's links down below. As always, I'm your host, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster of the Indie Game Academy, and in this case, the host of the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Excited to talk with Pekru here. Pekru I actually met at GDC this last year, where I got the chance to go hang out in the India Pavilion and meet a bunch of really cool Indian game developers. And Pekru's game, Sojourn Past, sort of struck a chord with me because it really felt like it follows the traditional indie story, and he's really built it up from nothing into something pretty cool. So Pekru, welcome to the show. What are you having for lunch here today?
Thanks for the introduction. I had fish for dinner. It's 9:30 p.m. for me right now. What about you?
Fish for dinner. I am currently just drinking coffee. We use one of those meal prep services, and I had what was it? Tofu General Tso's for breakfast/lunch. It was pretty solid.
Hmm.
It's one of our favorites. We reorder it all the time.
I should try this sometime.
Absolutely. Well, welcome to the show, man. It was really lovely getting to meet you in person. I have a soft spot for a couple of games. I think we all do. For a couple of games that are from my childhood. One of those big ones is Chrono Trigger, which I am very vocal about on this show and in other places. Chrono Trigger is a Super Nintendo game. It is a JRPG. It's one of the first of its kind. It really defined the JRPG genre, and is just a beloved game in general. And it's also just it is my favorite game that I will never release that title of. When I sat down and I got to play Sojourn Past, I had a lot of the same emotional chills and connectivity that I did when I first played Chrono Trigger. You've built something pretty awesome already, Pekru. So maybe why don't we start with just talking about your game?
Thanks for the comparison. I have a confession though. I have never played Chrono Trigger, so I can't really relate to you.
All right,
Anyway,
I think we'll end this episode here. Just kidding.
Bye. See you guys. Anyway, yeah. So the game Sojourn Pass is a 2D pixel action adventure. It's very heavily inspired by Hyper Light Drifter, I would say. So it actually started as should I just go back to how everything started? Should I just start from there,
Sure.
or should I?
All right. Yeah, that's normally where we start. I was just excited about Sojourn. So how about this then? Tell us your origin story, Pekru. How did you get started, and how did you get to where you are today?
This was back in 2012. That was when I was in my first year of engineering. So I really wanted to pursue game development, but I'm from India, and then I'm from a very northeastern part of India. So game development is no one's ever heard of it, and there's no industry at that time, right? So I did what a typical Indian student would do. I went for my computer science engineering, but I was at that time I was tinkering around with RPG Maker. I don't know if you have heard of that engine.
But of course.
I grew up playing a lot of niche RPG Maker games, and I was very inspired by a lot of those games as well. So I was just experimenting during my college days with RPG Maker. This was way back in 2011, 12, 13. And then around 2015, I actually got to study a short game development course, which taught me, the very basics of game programming and Unity. And then after that, I got a job at a game dev company, but India is very mobile focused game. So you meet, I grew up inspired by indie games like Undertale and all those Fez and Stardew Valley and all those very awesome indie games. And when you go and work in a mobile game industry, it's very different. It's soul crushing kind of, the way the games are built. So I wasn't really into that. So I really wanted to pursue game development as a career, but for me there was no options. Like I could not, obviously I could not afford going abroad and studying like what most people do. And even if I wanted to work on PC and console games, like there's very few studios in India. I mean, I don't think there were any at that time. I mean, it was very new. This is probably around 2016, 17. So I made the decision to just go back home. And my home is a very small town. It's worse than Indian cities. So there's no, game dev scene. I mean, I was probably the only game developer in my home around that time.
Mm.
So uh, you can call it a little bit of stupidity, or just ignorance is bliss kind of
Optimism.
situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just went home, and then I was started learning about Unity through YouTube tutorials, Brekkies and all those many creators. This that was 2018, and that was when I first started. The first game I wanted to make was I wanted to clone RPG Maker engine in Unity, and I wanted to work on a turn-based RPG because I also grew up playing a lot of RPG Maker games.
Mm.
So it started then there, but I'm very bad at art. So quickly I realized that, oh no, this is not gonna work. I need somebody's help to with the art. So I was searching around and I met my very good friend Imli, and that was after a year when I returned home. And Imli has been with me since then. I mean, he has been part of ReDimension Games. He was the first partner. I mean, he's a co-founder right now. So that's when we met. That was 2019, and we started working on that RPG game. But again, since we are so inexperienced with everything, like we have this grand dreams, we want to do this, we want to do that, but we lack any expertise to do. Like we haven't even properly planned stuff. We're just going, doing things as it is and learning as we go. Right? We did a lot of mistakes, and there was no proper planning, and we quickly realized that what we planned was beyond scope. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we pivoted to, okay, let's make a boss rush game. Let's make something smaller we can manage. So at that time, I was playing Fury. I don't know if you have heard of that game. It's a boss rush game, 3D boss rush game, mixed with some bullet hell mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very inspired by that, and I want to make something like that in 2D. So we came up with some parry system, like how Fury has, and then we were just experimenting in 2D. And then that experimentation lasted for about a year, and then we worked. That was a prototype, probably. A lot of
A year-long prototype.
Yes, because we haven't even planned anything, right?
Yep.
We're completely ignorant at the time about if you are already from the industry and then you go indie. I mean, you have a sense of things, right? What you need to do, what systems you need to have in place for that thing to work. But we did not have that. We just had a bunch of YouTube tutorials, like, and then
Yep.
a whole lot of ignorance. Anyway,
Optimism.
yep, that as well.
Yeah.
One of the positives of ignorance is optimism, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And then we worked on a game called After Eden after that. This was also a pixel art game, and we evolved some of the mechanics, parry mechanics. And that was probably the first early version of Sojourn Past. This was back in 2021, just after COVID, around that. We worked on that for a year, and then we released just a short demo. And we at the time, this is probably around our 3.5 years of development. This is around that time, so we were starting to become a little bit better at what we do. So the game was we just tested with a close group, maybe 100 200 people, and then we saw potential in it. But there were a lot of balancing issues. Like I'm not a game designer, and Imli is also an artist, and we also we just learn as we go. So we had a lot of balancing issues with After Eden. So we just eliminated that entire parry system, and then Sojourn Past mechanics were born. The dagger teleporting mechanics was also a part of After Eden. and then that parry system got changed into what Sojourn Past has now with the burst, and we borrowed a little bit from games we were inspired by also.
Amazing.
I can see a question here. Do I answer it now or later?
We'll answer it later. I'll actually call them out one at a time and bring people up on stage. So for
Okay,
now,
cool.
we can just hang out, me and you. That's it's already a really fascinating story. I think there's a lot to pull out of it. So maybe the first thing to say is a formula that I see really often with indies is the two people that start it. I'm a big fan of like a team of like five-ish. But if you've got two, the two people generally are one person who's like engineer, designer, who does a bit of both, and then one person is the artist. That's like almost always where the duo team comes from. You can make it work with many other duos, but that's what I see the most common. So that's maybe the first thing to pull out. I also want to just commend you, and I think this is something for everybody here. So Sojourn Past, for clarity, like Sojourn Past is getting some real notoriety right now. It's getting featured in many places, and is not yet launched, but is doing well for itself in pre-launch. And I just want to point out that Pekru, how many years was that? That's
Uh,
multiple years. Yeah, of you
we are in our,
trying.
I mean,
Yeah,
if you count the birth of our studio and then the entire journey, we are on our 5th year right now.
there you go. Yeah, fifth year and like kind of third game, but those games each sort of taught you something, got you a little bit closer to the goal, and you're even
Mm.
incorporating ideas from previous games. So one of the first things to say, by the way, yeah, people should check out Sojourn Past. Somebody link it there, and then go look at videos. In particular, get some of the audio in there while you're watching the video because it's really quite effective. The thing I just wanted to say though is like just start. I know this is a piece of advice I also give all the time, and I think your journey here, Pekru, really like exemplifies it for a lot of people. Pekru is in a part of the world outside of the U.S. is really any other place outside of the U.S. just has way less access to game development. There's not really an industry. There's not really industry help. There's not really educational resources, although that is starting to change, thankfully. And yet Pekru just started and just got a little bit closer and a little bit closer. And it took really more than 5 years because we're not including the time in which you were working for other studios and getting acquainted with engineering and RPG Maker to even get to a game that's now looking pretty promising. It's really normal for it to take a long time. I'm actually curious, Pekru, what were you doing to financially support yourself during these last 5 years?
Uh, so one thing it's the culture here, right? I mean, where I grew up in, it's very common for me to live with my parents. So when I returned home, I was living with my parents, and then they were like, I was just living rent free, and I had food and roof over my head. And that's probably most of the. I mean, I didn't have to worry about that. So in terms of just living, staying alive, I was okay. And there was also me and Imli. We used to sell his merch. He used to make a bunch of artwork, and we sell that merch, and just as a kind of income to get us by, right? Just to manage our very meager expenses. We live very frugally for a good couple of years. Just for context, we got funding this year, probably around this was March this year. So that was my first salary ever. I mean, that month was my first salary ever, proper salary, right?
4 years in.
Now, after we've gotten the funding is a decent amount of money, so we're actually able to make a livable wage at the moment, and we have also been able to hire more people to help with the game.
That's amazing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So sorry, I went on a tangent, but
that's okay. It's a
yeah,
good tangent.
most of the years, it was mostly us living very frugally, and then just doing some side hustles, I would say. But this was our main. We were doing it full time, game development. We would come to the office. We had a small office. We would come there and then work the entire day, and then all the side hustles were left for the weekends or some other days. But also, I would not recommend doing that because burnout is a very big issue. We
Yeah.
we also lost a lot of time because of burnout as well.
Yeah, it's a real double-edged sword.
Mm.
Part of the reason I bring it up though is because funding in this day and age is pretty harsh. We've seen in the U.S. I just looked up these stats and they're like a little depressing. We've seen a 70% drop basically in how much got funded between 2023 and 2022. I expect it's not as extreme of a drop this year simply because that's a lot. There's a lot less to drop, but I am pretty confident we'll see even more of a drop by the end of this year, by the time we start tracking. So funding is just honestly harder to get right now, and will probably continue to be so for at least another year, possibly 2 years. And so it's inspiring. I think it's really wonderful. The message that I'm hoping to pull out of this, I guess, for the audience is you can still do it. It's stressful and burnout is real, but you can absolutely run a game development studio while self-supporting yourself. I did that myself with my first company, Mew and Me, and really still to this day, Indie Game Academy has not received any kind of funding. This is all bootstrapped. Um, it's a lot of work, and it's not burnout that I really think should be required. I don't think it's healthy, and I would hope for a culture where it's not required and there's more supportive resources for people who are trying to do it. But one way or another, I think bottom line message is don't let funding be the barrier that stops you from trying it, because you can absolutely start on the side and get a little bit better and a little bit better and make a little bit better of a game and a little bit better of a game and eventually wind up securing yourself some funding and a paycheck. Also, congratulations. That's pretty cool.
Thank you. One thing I would also like to add is, I mean, there's a lot of, in my case, I would say not having to worry about food and roof over my head was also, it's a form of funding if you think about it in a very
Yeah.
grand scheme of things. So it's good to account for those also. And then also, when I started, time was not really a factor for me. I mean, I had a lot of time to experiment. I did not worry about, I can do this only for 2 years or 3 years. I was more of, I think I was just at maybe 5 years. I can give it 5 years probably. Now we are in our fifth year now. Yeah, so time was also a very big resource for me.
So you're done after this year, is what you're saying?
Oh,
You're
what?
done after this year, is what you're saying? You said you could give it 5 years, so you're done now. You've been
I
doing it for
mean,
5
now
years.
that I have funding, I can go longer. But
Oh, I see.
I mean, I had like 5 year time to experiment and just try it out. I mean, it was my self-imposed time,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's a real gift to have somebody who can support you like that. To relate it to my own story again, when we were saving up for the house that my partner and I now live in, we spent really like 2 years doing sort of couch to couch. We would rent Airbnbs and things like that in between, but very much relying on our family and our support system to help us get through that time period and save up for a property. So absolutely, building a support network and a support system and being willing to lean on people while not pushing that too far, I think is a really wonderful lesson to take away as well. I'm curious, Pekru. So you're now seeing success. You've received some funding. And by the way, this is another thing that I hear from indies all the time or see from indies. They kind of think like, you got funding, all right, success. And they don't really realize how much work there still is past that moment because they're so focused on landing that funding. But tell us a little bit about what you think you can teach the audience. You gave us this topic of how to start an indie dev studio with nothing. So tell us a little bit more. Like, how does one do that? Introduce us to that.
Okay. I think the title is a little bit deceptive. I only realized it after I submitted my topic, right? So I would not really say it's nothing because I had all these support systems and But one thing I would like to put forward is one of our biggest mistakes has been lack of proper planning, whether it be assessment of our own skills or assessment of timeline or assessment of our own resources. Uh, say for example, we wanted to make this amazing game, this idea we had, but we had no idea what kind of skills it takes, right? So we wasted a lot of time on there, and then Anyway, before I go on a tangent, sorry, I tend to do this a lot. Before I go on a tangent again,
Tangents are good. I'll pull you back if you get too far. Don't worry about it.
thanks for yeah, I would
Yeah,
appreciate that. Anyway, so number one advice would be plan everything properly. Like take stock of what you have, whether that be time or whether it be people you can pull favor from, or some your connections. Maybe when I started, I had a very hard time finding artists, and we are still looking for more artists or for our team. It's part of where we are in the part of the world where we are, and also part of because we cannot afford to hire a lot of people from major areas of the world. I mean, due to the currency differences and stuff like that. Anyway, there is take stock of your resources, what you are able to achieve before you start, right? And also, for me, my end goal is I did not start my journey as I want to be indie forever. My goal was I want to have a team to work together with to make awesome games. So that's my end goal till now. Maybe we get this stroke of luck that we become much bigger and then we don't stay indie forever. Maybe that's like 5, 6 years, 10 years, probably 15 years down the line. Maybe I don't know, but that is my goal. So what are the small steps I can take to achieve that goal, right? With the context of your local environment. Like you hear about my story, but everything I say would not work for you. You need to apply that with context to where you are. So for me, it was one of my goals is I want to work with the team and make really awesome games. But another goal is I want to bring a change to my local environment. So I want to grow this game development industry, and also where I'm from, there's a huge unemployment problem. So I mean, speaking of the society as a whole, so I want to be able to create jobs for people also, and just it's very context heavy, but yeah, bringing a change in my local environment is also, I mean, my local to the people around me is also very important for me. Without going into too much detail, I just people are very focused on government related jobs, and then different jobs like you want to be an artist, you want to be a musician, you want to be a game developer. These kinds of jobs are looked down upon. So I want to inspire people, and then also create these opportunities at the same time. It should not just be me talking about you can do it, but actually me being able to provide one or two or 5, 6 people more jobs. So that's my end goal. So the end goal, you decide on your end goals, and then you take small steps to work towards that. For me, that was one of the small steps I took was this was back in 2022, just before Sojourn Past got the recognition and stuff like that. So a year before that, I brought in an intern. He was really interested in game development, but I had no. I would say intern, but I would say it's more of a trainee. I was teaching him stuff. Yes, like my student, right? So he used to come to the office, and I would give him like 2 or 3 hours every day, just this exercise that I was teaching whatever I knew with regards to game programming, right? And I just taught him with the expectation that nothing would happen. I mean, I was even prepared for him to just move on and find a job somewhere, but he has stayed on with me till today is there, and then he's become a full-time member. I mean, he was the first person I once the funding came, he was the first person I offered. I now do you want a job here? And he's part of the team now, and then he's become a really reliable programmer. So these are the small steps I took, and then hopefully, I mean, this was a dream for me right before. Now it's a reality. I mean, I actually have a team now to work with. So steps of my dreams are being achieved slowly, but at the same time, I have to be careful because the game has to be successful, and all these metrics. So yeah, just take stock of what you have, and then what your end goals are, and then try to break that down into smaller chunks and see what happens. Like in a very this is a 5-year plan, this is a 3-year plan, this is like a 1 or 2 month plan, kind of something like that.
Love that. Yeah, I think there's indies in general There's a weird like strength and weakness of an indie where one of the strengths is they just make games. Everything else doesn't matter. I'm an indie developer. I just make games. Everything else is secondary. I'm just going to make a great game, and we'll see what happens. That's a mentality I see in indies all the time that I think in general is a strength because all of the extra fluff that slows like professionals down is just not there. I don't care about Jira tickets. I just make the game. I don't care about like making sure that this is a marketable feature. I'm just going to make the game. But the reality of creating repeatable and sustainable success for a studio is that you do need to pay a little bit more attention. And hopefully you can find a way to balance keeping the I just make games mentality of an indie with a little bit more professionalism. I think what you're identifying here is basically like we've noticed we have to be a little bit more professional. And one of the main areas that we were lacking that is proper planning. So I love setting what I would probably just call like your mission and vision. What is it that your studio specifically, or even if it's not a studio, if you're founding something else, what is it that you're trying to achieve with this thing? And everybody has that for the most part. And sometimes all it is I really want to make cool games. But a lot of the time, there's a little bit more to it. And I would argue generally when you have a little bit more to it, like I'm trying to build the game industry in my country, in my location, that'll drive you much stronger than just about anything else. And it will keep you alive on those days where you're like, man, I'm just so burnt out. I don't want to do this shit anymore. So that's all wonderful. I also think being realistic about what resources you have available is another really good takeaway for people. Design and coming up with a concept is as much about your constraints as it is about your like objectives and what you're trying to achieve. Like, yes, you want to make something that's amazing, but you have to be realistic about what your team can build. And in general, when you're first getting started, you can build so much less than you think you can, and you will continue to have that problem throughout your entire career. So whenever you're coming up with a concept, assume it's going to take you 4 times as long as it will because it will, as you think it will because it will. What else might we pull out of here? I really like also splitting things down into small steps and almost like not knowing where some of the steps might take you. Proper planning, yes, but also just doing things that kind of feel like they match the mission and vision, like teaching this person who's now become a core team member. You didn't have that probably in a 5-year plan, but you had a general sense that it was going to go towards this thing you cared about, supporting and uplifting people in your community, and then that wound up being a value add eventually to your studio.
Yep. The smaller, you definitely hit the nail on the head. I mean, with the smaller step, right? Some things just happen when it just crosses your path. A few things. So, interesting stories. Even with the funding, right? The one we got right now, we weren't even really, we haven't planned to even apply for this, but back in 2023 when we won the award. That was when we were a team of 3. I forgot to mention we have a third co-founder. He's a musician, so
Nice.
we met him around 2020, just before after Eden. He was part of the team since then. Anyway, back to the funding. So we haven't really thought in terms of we would just showcase our game and see how people are receptive towards it, and then we'll go from there. And then we had applied for one of the award categories, and then we were up against very big players. I don't know if you heard of that MPL in India. It's a very big mobile game, of course, but they're huge funding. Like I don't know, we are like ants compared to them in terms of funding, right? And then there's this super gaming Indus. The game is called Indus. So we were in the top 5 nominees, and then we actually won that among these. There were a couple of indies also. So we did not really think we would win. And when we won, a lot of things happened, and people were really supportive of us. And especially I also have a mentor, so he was also he helped us get a lot of connections, and then he connected us to these Krafton guys, and so we are funded by this Krafton right now. The guys behind PUBG, they have this program for Indian game developers called the Krafton India Game Developer Incubator, Gaming Incubator, sorry, KIGI. Anyway, they introduced us to that, and then we got selected. That's how we got the funding. Uh, so when that happened, and then we got to realize, oh, this can actually happen, right? The funding can actually happen. Then we pivoted to searching for new people to add to the team. And then, as I mentioned before, one of the first members were the programmer, my student. And then there was this another person. She has been working on and off with us for the past couple of years. Not full time, but she's been really. So these two people were our first candidates, and then as we were applying for the funding, we were also trying to find people to join the team. And one interesting note is most of my team members we are self-taught. Like I said, there's no industry to speak of, and then back in my hometown, there's nothing. So it's been a couple of months now that we've been together. But coming back to the original point, I mean, we haven't planned any of this. These things just happen along the way. So there's some things you can plan long term, and then there's things you can plan short term with how events play out. And then this couple of last year and couple of months before last year, these were very fast years for us in terms of keeping things moving. And the years before that were like very slow and painful, just learning the process. And nothing happens. You just go to the office, you do your job, and then you come back. And this repeats on and on and on and on. It's very monotonous, but there's, I guess, different cycles to this journey, I would say.
Amazing. I love hearing. I was actually going to ask how the funding happened. So I love that you got a little bit of notoriety from the competition. Was this the Indie Game Federation awards that you're talking about,
no.
or was this something else?
It was in the India Game Developers Conference. So that
Okay,
is
okay.
it's the biggest game developer event, I would say, in India. And these were the guys behind. The reason I could come to GDC was because they sponsored a booth for us. So
Yeah.
otherwise we could not have been able to even afford the booth itself, right?
That's really cool. Yeah, so you gained a little notoriety, and then suddenly this funding opportunity presented itself. It definitely, in general, the things that you look for happen, but I think there's also something to be said for sort of the mystical nature of really just focusing on making an amazing game and learning the steps bit by bit. And I think having that general plan, this is what we're aiming for, helps a lot. And I often find like there's actual stats on this. In fact, I think Dylan in the audience right now told me these stats. In general, you're 40% more likely to hit a goal if it's just written down, like with no other contributing factors. I wrote it down. I'm 40% more likely to get it. And you're 70% more likely to hit a goal if you speak it out loud to people that you trust and whose opinions matter to you. There's a little bit of like pure accountability there. But the reason that I bring it up is like you're talking about planning, very important. Indies don't do it enough. Plan your actual development, I think, is the most important thing. Here's the actual timeline. Here's when we're hitting alpha. Here's when we're making an announcement about alpha. Here's when we're hitting beta. Here's when we're making an announcement about that. Here's the showcase we're going to do at beta. Like actually plan all of that. That's maybe a big takeaway. But I think there's also something to be said for just setting the goals and kind of trust in the process. You didn't know funding would be coming from this. You didn't know you'd even win that award show. You felt not confident about winning that award. But when you put it out into the universe, this sounds very frou-frou, but it's kind of true. Oftentimes, even subconsciously, you're going to be working on it, and the other people who are hearing about that goal and who care about you are also working on it. They're also pitching for you. You have a mentor, for instance, that you talked about. That's a huge one. If you can find somebody to have your back and to teach you a little bit, that's a huge boon in general. So I think like setting goals, but I also love that things just happened because you just like kind of hoped they would happen.
One thing I would like to just comment on is we're not really confident, not because that our product was bad, but it was because just with the Indian scene context, and these are big companies, and they have their fingers everywhere, probably, and and we also knew. It's still on our minds. The Indian market is probably not our best audience for the type of game we are making. So it's part of that pessimism, optimism. I don't know what you would call it, but we have also been really. That has been one of our challenges, finding our right target audience, right? Uh, mm, yeah. Anyway, before let's move on to the next thing.
I love it. I think it's very true. Yeah, a business plan. Niv in the audience says business plans are huge. Put it on paper. Do the thing. Lol. It's very true. Business plans are something that indies skip all the time because they think it's extra work. And the thing is, like, in some ways they are. Your first couple of business plans, just like your first couple of games, are really going to suck. And they're not going to have enough detail, and they'll have too much detail on something random that doesn't matter. They'll be too rigid in some ways, they'll be too flexible in other ways. But just like any other skill, literally anything you can imagine, you get better at it when you spend hours doing it. So I think, just start doing that kind of thing now. Start including marketing and publicity. Start targeting your audience. That's a huge one. Actually picking who your game is for and making it for them. That makes such a big difference. And doing your homework, I think, planning from the get-go. You'll be crap at it, but then you'll get slightly better at it, and you'll only be pretty bad at it, and then you'll be just bad at it, and then you'll be okay at it. Anyway, it is time for community questions. So I've brought Rick up onto the stage. Rick is our chief question asker. Rick, would you like to ask your first question of Pekru?
Yeah, I'm going to start with the third question here. So, like, you started off with a two-man dev team, and that was your work rhythm for a while. But now you've started to expand your team, and you're working with the dynamics of bringing people into systems that you've been using. And this is what kinds of challenges have you been faced with in getting somebody who is not super familiar with the way you build your projects onboarded into your project so that they can be effective in their collaboration with you? And how have you resolved those challenges?
I'll approach it from two different angles. One is from a programming perspective, and one is from an art perspective. So, in terms of programming, the only additional programmer we brought into was my student. So, it was not really hard for me to onboard him into the project because since I taught him he codes like me, kind of, and then it's not very difficult. I mean, we have follow the same naming conventions. We follow like in the same code structure and whatever. So that was it was not very difficult for me. And if I were to bring another programmer, I am not sure how that would work. But I assume the code I've written before is fairly decent. And I also have this, we started as an indie team. We want to grow bigger. So I have to have this mentality that the people I bring into the team are more skilled than me. So maybe I would ideally search for a programmer who would be able to make these structures which would work for a better team. If the point we were ever to reach at that point, that is one. And with regards to the art, so again, coming back to planning, we planned everything so poorly. We don't have any documentation before. So last December 2023, and January, February, and part of March was probably us creating all this documentation from the reverse side, so that when these new people would join, we would actually have some kind of structure for them to be able to follow. And we also tried to when the new people joined in, we tried to come up with some pipelines. So we were actually researching how those work pipelines would work for us, and we actually started using tools like Trello to manage and Notion. Notion.
I did the mind head exploding thing there.
So, yeah, I mean, we're definitely still a work in process right now, but these are the things we have been doing. And yeah, I think that's pretty much my inputs on this, I would say.
That sounds really it makes a lot of sense. Because you had time to work with your student, you were able to onboard them into your method of building a project. But then it seems like you have a history as an educator, so for that reason you take a little bit of an empathetic approach and understand that these people coming from the outside don't understand what this is. So you'd create the onboarding materials, and you take the time to make sure that they have a steady ramp into your project, rather than saying, welcome to the project, be productive.
Yep.
Yes, and also having these systems will also help you I mean, otherwise the project will become very chaotic. And also one of the things we did was once our team became bigger, we delegated this responsibility to this person and that responsibility to that person. Right, that is very important. Before it was just two of us, we would just go back and forth. But now that there's actually there's 4 artists right now, so we just put one artist in charge of the entire animation process, like our character animations, and then make that person in charge of this. So I would say delegation of tasks is also a very important. I can't remember the word right now, but I'm sure you guys get what I mean.
Right, if I can ask, how many people are on your team? I don't think I heard that.
We are 8 right now.
8? Awesome.
Yeah. So
Amazing.
let me just break down the team. We have 2 programmers, we have a musician, and we have 4 artists, and we have a person helping us with community management, miscellaneous, everything, reaching out to people. This dev, not exactly, but yeah, like miscellaneous person. I mean, that sounds wrong, but she does a lot of extra
Producer
work.
maybe or something like that.
Maybe.
A
Yeah.
facilitator.
Yeah, there you go. Facilitator. I love Niv. Niv called out a quote that you just gave us, Pekru, which I think is a really good one and is worth repeating, which is people I bring onto the team are more skilled than me. As you build out a team, I think it's really important to call out that letting go of the ego and letting go of the project almost is a big part of what's going to build an effective team. It is a terribly difficult balance that I still have not figured out for myself, which is like holding onto the vision of what the game is versus letting everybody else contribute their own vision of what the game is. Naturally, as a collaborative creative process, your game will not be exactly what you think it should be. Other people will wind up contributing their ideas, their thoughts, their vision of what the game should be, and it will wind up being different from what anybody ever imagined. That's a big part of how games become wonderful, and learning to let go in many areas and then learning to hold on to the vision in certain areas is a real challenge by itself. But I think just the very concept of like egoless, it's not about who's like better or worse. I want the people who are really freaking good at what they do on this project is a big part of building an awesome team.
Definitely.
Do you agree with that? Yeah.
Yep. I mean, also that's also what I've been struggling with. How much we started off as this small team. Now, how much control do I want to have? But I've also realized that I'm the project manager. I mean, I manage the project right now, probably, but there is way too much work for one person. I'm still involved in the development process, but my experience has been, slowly. I think the project manager should not be handling development as well. That's my point of view right now. Like once the project scales up to more people, it's way too much work. But here we are right now. We're still figuring things out.
It's really true. I just for the game jam that we did, I was both design lead and creative director, and I thought that those two things would be like easy. That's kind of almost the same role, sort of, and it was really hard. Yeah, in general, having one area is very helpful. All right, we've got Kron the dev up on the stage. Kron, would you like to ask your question about getting started?
Yeah, I just had a little question. I'm having a hard time mixing my routine with effective game development. Honestly, I think over time, as time passes, it comes together by itself. But I still would like to know if any of you have any tips and tricks to accelerate this process.
It sounds like balancing. How do you fit game development learning into your schedule? Is that about the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have a day job and are you learning on the side or?
I was learning by myself. I joined not a long time ago, so yeah.
Oh, so it's right now it's just you. Spending the whole day learning game development, is it?
Do you have other commitments, Kron?
Not really. I'm not really spending the whole day, but a big part of my day learning. I bought myself a a few books that I kind of spent my time reading and developing alongside of reading. And honestly, it helped me out throughout. I started about a year and a half ago. It really helped me out, gain some knowledge.
I'll just try to approach it from a very different angle. What do you think your long-term, I mean, short-ish 6-month term goal, 1-year term goal is? Why are you learning game development or in the game development?
Well, I would like to one day found perhaps not a big one, but a community of co-working around projects. And this, all the while having a very friendly nature in the community, right? And that's pretty much it. Just developing games in a friendly community. That's pretty much what I've wanted along. Pretty much a lot of time.
What do you think, Pekru? I have some thoughts, but I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Can you go ahead? I need some time to formulate my
Sure.
thoughts.
Yeah, I get it. It's really interesting. We're simultaneously in a period of time called the information era, and there's a reason for that because you can get access to literally anything by just typing it on a little magic device. The problem with that is it's really hard to direct because God, there's so much information all the time and so many resources all the time that it's sort of like, well, what do I spend my time doing? There's so many options. So I totally get the feeling, Kron, of almost being a little overwhelmed or undirected. Like, how do I really build a routine and make sure I'm heading in the right direction? There's not necessarily anything super specific I can recommend, but there are a couple things. Number one, I thoroughly believe there's a reason that I founded the Indie Game Academy. I thoroughly believe that the best thing you can do for yourself at this point in time for almost any eventuality, whether you're trying to start your own studio, whether you're trying to work for somebody else, whether you're just doing it for fun, is to actually finish games. So one of the best things you can do, Kron, is start revolving your education around finishing titles. And they don't have to be long. They can be, I actually recommend probably you start with like a 1 to 3 month long project, and then you do another one that size and another one that size, and then you can start thinking about like 6 month long projects after that. And by setting yourself up with a specific time box, this is how much time I have to build this specific game. I'm not changing the game. This is the game. You wind up forcing yourself to learn a bunch of stuff. You'll go, oh shit, how do I make the multiplayer work? Actually, don't do multiplayer. I take that back.
Yeah,
start with multiplayer.
Pretty hard.
Sure, yeah. So instead, maybe you're making an RPG or something. You're like, oh shit, how do I make the combat work? That'll force you to go find that information that is available out there to do that specific task. But basically, you're just going to be finishing games, which is really what everybody cares about when they're looking at your portfolio. And it's what we do here. That's the whole point. So that would be maybe my main piece of advice is structure your education around actually releasing titles. And probably your first 3, your first 5, your first 10 are not going to be very good. And you might just not even bother charging money for them. It's just about getting them done. But that way you get a little closer to an exceptional game. You start to build a backlog and a portfolio, and you're forced to learn because you got to build that game by a specific date.
Yeah, basically time motivation relative to learning, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and some people in the audience there are saying accountability. That's a big one too. Different people have different relationships with accountability, but any way you can build accountability into your life really helps too. So if you have friends who are working on things, maybe make one of the things that helped me a lot when I was getting started is mutual accountability calls. We would do regular calls. The cadence I always liked was every 2 weeks, where we would check in on each other's projects and just be like, hey, you said you were going to get this done. Did it get done? Mentors are really great for that as well. And then the biggest thing is just setting those time boxes. So this is the date I'm going to release this game, period. There is no moving it. It's just great practice by itself too.
Right. Well, thank you so much. That really gives some advice. I haven't really set a lot of boundaries to my deadlines prior to this because I said to myself, well, I have all the time to read through this book, and I can work along it, so it's not really not a lot of pressure, right? But this is an interesting opinion, and I will make sure to dig into it way more.
Yeah, what do you think, Pekru? Am I close? What is your opinion?
Yep. I mean, I would say do projects with point, right? You need to have a reason to finish the project. Like you start, let's say you are participating in game jam. I would also highly recommend participating in game jams. You learn a lot in a very short condensed period. Anyway, I would say not just learn for the sake of learning, but you want to achieve something. So what do I need to learn to achieve that goal? Kind of from that perspective.
I like that.
You
Yeah.
want to work on, let's say you want to make this kind of game. So what do I need to learn to make that kind of game? Something like that, right? With an end goal in mind.
I like the idea of the games each having their own end goal as well. I'm not just going to make an RPG because it's fun. I'm making an RPG because I want to learn how to do, data storage of dialogue options or something like that.
I also thought I had some thoughts prior to this about 2 months ago about perhaps starting with the community. Perhaps that would motivate me, but I abandoned that idea because, well, I thought to center on myself. And honestly, I don't really know. Was that a good choice? Wasn't that a good choice? I don't know.
It's tough to say. In general, I think indies wait too long to make community. Getting your game an audience, getting people to buy your game is like 50% of the process. You can build an exceptional game and not a single person will buy it if they don't know about it, right? So community building is hugely important for indies. We do a ton of guerrilla marketing. We try to bring in people who are just excited about us or excited about our game, and we try to keep them around as best we can. Best place to do that is on Discord. But I feel like you are probably a little early in the process for that. I would say start doing that, yes, but don't make it about that. Make it about the learning. Might as well bring in a couple of people if you can and start to build a community if you can. And then when and if you are releasing games, hopefully their audience. But I would say that probably you don't need to worry about that right now until you're actually trying to build commercial projects, actually trying to make money. What do you think, Pekru?
I agree. I mean, I don't think I can add much on that.
Yeah. I'm Niv says start building a Discord server the moment you have a concept in your brain. Yes, I think yes, but only if it's a commercial project. Only if it's for money. If it's just for practice, it's kind of like, that's probably just going to be extra time. Although it's also good practice to practice building an audience. So I don't know. It's a little bit of a judgment call on what skills you are most interested in building. Discord and community building are hugely important, but after our experience with that game jam I keep mentioning, I actually think I would recommend indies always have somebody whose job that is, and they're not worrying about it. It's a part of their cycle, but it's somebody else's responsibility because it's a ton to manage. Honestly, it's really a whole different skill. All right, we're pretty much at the end of time. Yeah, was that helpful, Kron?
Yeah, I just had a little question for the end. Then, if creating a community at last, is it better to create a community when there will be commercial projects for every single project, or a general community for the group, the co-working space, right? And just share the games into all of those games into that space.
You have any thoughts on that, Pekru?
I mean, the more communities you are you connect with, the more communities you connect with, the better it's for you as an indie developer. I would say try to reach. I mean, you can create your own. You can be a part of others as well. And I would say if you are actually able to manage everything, you can do everything. But at the same time, there's this cost. I don't want to get too deep into it, but having it is a good thing. I mean, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I would say neither. I've asked this exact question myself, Kron. Do I make a community for each game, or do I make a community for the studio? Is essentially what you're asking. And I have always heard the answer, either. I don't think either is necessarily better. To be honest, I'd probably recommend you specifically, Kron, focus just on studios. Make a community for your studio wide, because you're early enough in the process that you're going to make a bunch of games that aren't very good first, which I'm not insulting you. That's normal. That's good.
Yeah.
Which means making a community for every single one of them is just going to be a lot. And you're going to wind up with 50 people here or 100 people here that just disappear once you make a new community, and another 200 people there. And so by just having one for the studio, then they actually might even get into the process. They're like, oh yeah, Kron is learning so much. This has been really fun to watch. Either way works. There's really no way is better in this specific question. For indies, I think I probably recommend doing it studio wide, because then you're building a story about your studio instead of just trying to market this game.
All right. Well, thank you a ton for your answers, because it really answered some burning questions. Well, the routine is the most burning one, but yeah, other ones were pretty interesting too for me. So
Absolutely.
I thank you a lot for that.
Yeah, thank you, Kron. All right, so
Yeah.
we're a little over time. We have one more question from Rick I would love to get in, and then we'll say goodbye. Rick, would you like to ask one more question? Final question of the day.
Was there a specific one you wanted of the two left?
No, go ahead. Take your pick.
Okay. So I am curious. You said that you managed to make a livable wage, and so I'm curious. In the U.S., in some of the moderate cost of living areas, the cost of living will be about $2,000 or $3,000 US per month. I'm curious about what the cost of living is where you are, and then if you think that it makes you more competitive, people in your region of the world, when it comes to pitching to investors for money. Can you achieve your funding goals a lot easier? Like, is that an advantage? But then conversely, I also am curious from your perspective, what are some advantages that US based people might have?
Mm. Uh, I'll start with the livable wage question. So most freshers, let's assume that I straight out of college, I get employed in a normal software company as an engineer. I would earn around 30,000 rupees a month. That is probably around $350 a month. So with that, you could make a livable wage, and that's the city. And then I'm from a small town. It's much lower than that. It's probably around 250 USD per month. So I would consider that livable. I mean, it's definitely not a lot, but it's definitely not like you would not struggle. So that comes to let me do some quick math here, and then that is probably $3,000 per year annually before taxes, of course. Anyway, so that is livable. You won't be rich. That's probably like just enough to get by, kind of not very frugally also, but not very luxuriously also. What was the let me see.
So is that the secondary part is like, is that an advantage for you living where you are? And then what are the disadvantages? What are the advantages of being in like the US where cost of living is higher, but potentially there's other opportunities?
So with regards to investors, I am not very I have not approached a lot, but like most of the investors were Indian, and we speak in terms of so just for an example, our Krafton funding is somewhere between around 100 to 150 USD. So I'm aware that that's like a first year probably software developer salary in the US. Here, a person earns much more than that in a year. So that is enough to fund our entire development studio for probably a year. So just to put things into perspective. So maybe investors, publishers, they might be not. It's a very low risk investment for them, I would say. I mean, it's basically peanuts if you compare in a very global scale, right? So I'm not sure if that's an advantage, because at the same time we don't have this ecosystem of good developers. Everybody who's skilled, they will probably go to the US, probably go somewhere in Europe, and they will work for these bigger companies where you get paid way more. Yeah. So one major disadvantage is we don't have enough money to hire. If we were to hire people from the US or I mean, we wanted additional help. These countries, people from these countries are not accessible to us, mainly because there's a huge difference in the wages, right? And I think that's an advantage. People, let's say a studio from US has. I mean, even big studios do it like Rockstar Games, and they have this division in India where our team is basically they outsource most of the work for the project, right? So there's a very big difference in the costs involved in game development. Not sure if I covered the question.
No, that's actually very insightful. You know, where you can potentially get to that funding level that you and your local crew of people might be able to work. You have the disadvantage that you're kind of limited to that group of people because hiring in the higher cost of living areas, those people end up being way out of the budget that you ended up pitching for. So that does really limit who you're able to work with. So that's a very interesting insight that I didn't have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's maybe worth throwing in there. I've worked with, a lot of developers and a lot of indie studios and a lot of junior people just trying to get started. And pretty routinely, what I hear is outside of the US is significantly harder on game developers and on indie studios. And the main thing I hear is exactly what you just said, Pekru, which is just like connections. The whole industry is in the United States because it's still a pretty young industry, and this is where it started. And there are starting to be pockets of industry other places in the world, like IGDC. India is one of the ones that's really coming up now. India is really starting to have a game development scene, which is really awesome. But it is still very much a US game. So your talent pool is limited, your investor pool is limited. Investors in the US don't generally like to invest in teams outside of the US unless they are specifically like for that. Like you're talking about this India group, this India investment group. And so people tend to struggle to find funding outside of the US. So it's wonderful that you did. And that's also just maybe something for especially US listeners or those who are in countries with more of a game industry to hear. Like, you might be sad that you can't find funding, but also, hey, at least you have an ecosystem that's already here helping you out. Yeah. All right.
But one thing I would like, very big advantage for us is also like it's a double-edged sword, right? Lower cost of living is also, there's this level of success you need to reach to survive, right? I mean, if you're from a US and individual from a US, you need to make more money with your game in order to be able to continue this journey, I would say. So for us, the bar is a little lower. Not that we want it to get lower, but yeah, kind of.
Yeah. You can make a little less money and it's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
It still doesn't it doesn't take away from the achievement that you guys have of making an awesome game. Like, it doesn't matter where in the world you are, it still takes the same amount of effort to create something amazing.
Love that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Awesome. All right. Well, we are definitely at the end of the episode. Pekru, so what we like to do here on this show is we assign a homework assignment for people to practice some of what we talked about here today. So what is something the audience can do in the next week that'll take them about an hour to practice some of what we talked about here today?
Probably planning. What are your long-term goals, short-term goals? Kind of just make that, I have this 30-year plan for me. That's a 30-year thing. So maybe you can start with a 10-year, and then what are the small steps? Try to, break it down as much as possible with the information you have at the moment. And then how can you achieve this, and what resources are available to me? How can I actually achieve this with the things I have right now? And if you don't have the things, let's say you don't have the proper connections, and how do I get those connections? You can make proper steps to make that. And then when more, like, as you go down, like, progress a few months, you can start adding more details, or you can remove some of the details, kind of.
I love that. All right. Yeah. So make yourself your homework from us, from Pekru here, is to make a 10-year plan for your own life, and or for your indie studio, and or for your game, whichever sounds the most exciting to you, and is the thing you will actually do. Once you do it, tag us on LinkedIn. You can find both Pekru. We'll leave a link down below, and you can find the Indie Game Academy on LinkedIn. Post about it. Tell us your 10-year plan or maybe the highlights, and let us know. We can give you some feedback. And if that feels a little too intimidating, you could also just drop it in the Discord. We are super kind and goofy and good here. Nobody will make fun of you. We'll only be excited about it. All right. It is definitely the end of the episode. Before we say goodbye, is there any last minute advice you want to give or anything you want to plug here at the end?
I feel like most of the people here would be able to advise me instead of me advising them, right?
That's normal though. You're gonna feel like that forever. Everybody feels like that. I feel like that.
But it was really cool to just talk about us, our journey, and it's definitely like I said, it's us being able to connect with this global community. We haven't even thought about this. I mean, oh yes, just Google. I'll just type it here. Just Google my place after this, and you can just get an idea of where we are from. Right, it's a very small town, and we haven't even thought about how to just having these opportunities like game changing for us. I mean, it's very encouraging also, and uh, connecting with people who actually appreciate our game because it's oh yeah sorry, I'm gonna put a little bit story like my experiences with GDC, right? When I went and then I talked to this global community, I met a lot of people who were really appreciative of the game, and then they would talk about so much these conversations you could not have it back home. So just having these conversations is very it's great to have them. So thankful for that, and thanks for this also.
Amazing. I love that. Yeah, it's really cool. This is a true indie story. This is as indie as you can get. A community
Thank you.
that traditionally has probably never seen a game made in its history. And here we are seeing a video game that has now gained enough notoriety to come here onto largely a US stage. And it's just really cool, man. It's awesome to hear your story. It's also just exciting, and major congratulations on getting this far. And I hope we can continue to. IGA is trying to do a little bit more outreach ourselves into countries with a developing games industry. So hopefully, we can help make more stuff like this happen. And it's just really wonderful to hear your story.
Okay. Thank you.
Heck yeah.
Mm.
Awesome. All right. So then let's wrap up the episode for today. So as always, this episode airs once a week. This show airs once a week, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, live in the Discord. There's links to join down below. We're going to include links to Pekru, Sojourn Past, and everything else we may have mentioned down below. So definitely go wishlist Sojourn Past. If nothing else,
Yes.
give Pekru a little help here. Heck yes.
Yep. I would definitely appreciate that.
Yes, yes. Let's see if we can wish list bomb it a little bit. Get as many as we can for that. Takes you no time at all to go wish list that game. Please go do it. Otherwise, do your homework, your 10-year plan, and tag us. And then, as always, if you enjoy this episode, we ask that you send it along to just one other person. Who's one other person who might enjoy this chat. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
See
Hey guys, thank you everyone. Bye bye.